Hey guys, I kind of wanted to make my videos a little bit more visual, so I just decided to experiment with my little tablet here. And today I wanted to talk about characters. I'm really curious about you guys' process when it comes to characters. I've talked about it probably briefly on this channel at some point, and I probably use the phrase human force, and I'll just write that down here because this is something that actually has really helped me. When I used to think about characters, this is back before I really knew anything of what I was doing. Over the years, I have done a lot of research and development just by using resources such as writing reference books, which I actually find incredibly helpful. Before I really knew what I was doing, I remember I struggled a lot with characters, and this is probably just because I was using the wrong part of my brain. And I was thinking that the characters had to be someone that I built kind of from scratch. And yes, sort of created, of course. And I remember some of the writing reference books or tips here and there kind of did make this worse for me because they would make it so calculated in a cardboard cutout type of way. And they would be like, oh, what's the person's name? What is their occupation? What is the color of their hair? Like it was very robotic to me, right? Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm the type of person where I'm more driven by things like the spirit and the emotions versus more of just like the practical, logical, linear kind of methods. So for me to really develop character, I needed more so to feel the character. And this is kind of what I mean by human force. So finally, after years, I came to the conclusion that the character is not this character that I'm sort of building or creating from scratch just by my own expectations, but rather it is someone who I am channeling, right? And I've talked about this many times where I feel like the story, the characters, the energy of the work, it exists somewhere already. It's almost as if it already exists somewhere in the ether, somewhere even in another dimension, if you will. And by us tapping into it and filtering this through into where we are now, it's almost like cheating, right? We're like we're conduits and we're channeling this beautiful story, but it's like we're taking credit for it. The story is there. We are the channeler. We are the, I guess, transcriber, translator. And yes, it is our own original work because we are doing the hard work by the channeling and the development of the actual story. But the inspiration is what we're tapping into, and that's really what I mean here. So human force, I feel like this means that again, it's not a character. This is a real human being. This is a real force, meaning the energy. It's like they're a force of nature. They are dynamic within themselves, and that's what, like I said, that's what really helped me. So a few ways that I established this is well, the first and most obvious way to me was where I let me erase this top part here. The first and most obvious way was just by simply quote unquote meeting the person, right? So this was weird. That happened by accident for my novel. So I remember when I was developing my novel, I didn't have in mind any of the characters because realistically now, I hadn't met any of them. That's what I was realizing. Now, I guess the one exception is there was one female character who I loosely based off of a side of myself. So that one sort of, was the only exception. But as far as everyone else, I hadn't actually quote unquote met the characters. So some years passed and, life happens. And then it just turns out that when the time was right, I started to quote unquote meet these people, or these characters in real life. So one example is one of the main characters. This is basically someone who's a main antagonist, right? Kind of like a villain, I'll say, but in a sense. I met this person in real life. And what ended up happening after that was I started to realize, holy cow, like this person, this man in real life, he is this character in my novel. So after that happened, um, I started to finally be able to develop the character. Um, and I wanted to, just go over some ideas and methods and tips today, just like what has helped me, like I said. And that would be the first thing is quote unquote meeting the character. I'm kind of fighting with my tablet right now. Sorry. Let's try to get into a little bit more notes. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna write down here. I feel like this is really thick font. Hold on. Okay, that's better. So yeah, meeting the character. Now let me know in the comments, have you guys met your characters? Like, have you met them in real life? Are they based off of anybody? And obviously that doesn't have to necessarily mean you met them in this, uh, in this real life world, because it's just as valid if you met them, for example, like in a dream or, in a vision or in something like that. Now that never happened to me, but if it happened to you guys, that could certainly be great inspiration, right? So the way that I would say that this could work is if you have that character in mind, you have that person in your mind, and I would probably just start with maybe developing some things that are symbolic. So when I met this person in real life, I I didn't stick to the details of this person. I didn't just copy this real human person, but I just took the vibration, the energy of this person and kind of just again translated that into my character. So the character I'll just label as E, because for some reason I don't really want to get into the details of my novel. I don't want to psych myself out. So let's just call him E, right? And interestingly, the only thing that they shared was just the first letter of their name, right? The character and the real human person. Now, the character's name, I don't know exactly how it came to me. I might have actually done research first. So, one thing that will really be helpful to you guys, in my opinion, is doing research in any shape or form. And in my case, it helped me because of symbolism, right? So, when I started to research some of the important aspects of this character, right? Like what I wanted this character to represent. Now, one thing that comes to my mind immediately was this character represented fire in some way because of a lot of anger, or some physical aspects of this character, because he had some physical pains, and I was referring a lot to physical pains that he had in his body that felt like a stinging sensation. Now, there's another whole reason for that I can't get into right now, but I felt that it represented fire. So I was just researching some things, and a lot of things tended to fall into place when I do research, and it just has this aha moment. And then, so like I said, one aspect that I found very symbolic was the fire element. And then so I eventually stumbled upon a name that had fire significance, or in my case, weirdly, sometimes there would be a lot of religious significance, which it's not a religious book or anything, but sometimes it would kind of end up having some biblical or religious symbolism, which I found kind of cool. So anyway, when you guys are doing your research on your characters, you can find their first name this way. Well, first or last name. You can find their name this way. You can find different aspects of symbolism in your research that you want to incorporate. So you're like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Like, for example, if you are taking some aspects of, like, let's say mythology or religion or history or anything kind of like this, right? Basically, we're looking at aspects that already exist, and we're not copying, but if you feel like there's some aspect of your character that relates to any of these things, you will probably be able to incorporate this into your stories in a way that is meaningful and connecting to the character and their world, okay? So I will give you another example of how symbolism, like, well, honestly, symbolism is like the biggest aspect of my writing. Like, this is the foundation of my writing, is my symbolism. I mean, when I get into someday more so about the title and the main character, I will just let you know that the main character represents basically, I'll say, a certain animal, and every aspect of this character, like, the symbolism is rampant throughout the entire story, and throughout this character's entire persona is symbolized off of a particular animal. I'll call it animal, almost like a spirit animal. And so I started to go into more and more and more research just about this creature, And it really helped me to build the vibes of the character and the creepiness of it, and it because my works is so this particular one is a psychological thriller. So researching about this particular animal or creature or whatever you want to call it, it really helped me to get into that tone. So if you guys are feeling called to research anything, again, just try to go with your intuition of what you want to pull from it and say like, oh wow, that really fits with this character, or that really fits with this world. Let me write that down, and I assure you that you'll see it come up again and see how things fall into place. What else? So one other thing that I wanted to mention in terms of character, I was talking just a little bit ago about how, for me, the whole aspect of creating on my own, like building that character in that sort of robotic way just didn't work for me personally. So that is another thing that I want to mention here. I feel that characters, if they are one dimensional, that they are not real. Now, I will say that I have read many stories. I have watched many movies where the characters were completely hard to believe because they were so one dimensional, and because they were either too perfect or too, like, just so one sided. So I feel that a character, in order to really be portrayed in a way that is real, they have to be complex, right? So when I say complex, there's many different sides to them. And so that will end up being that perhaps they are flawed, and that's usually the case, right? Even in the best, most positive people, or even like the most pure of heart, we're going to find that these people or these characters are that they have some flaws, that they have dimension to them, that they have a history. This is, again, to me, the only way that they are real. So when I pick up a book sometimes and it's extremely sort of a cliche story with cliche characters, again, I just feel like they're way too perfect. It's like, sometimes it does end up being a little bit more like love stories, and I'm just like, oh God. I remember one time I was reading this story. I'm not going to call it out what it was because I don't want to be negative here, but it was just kind of so ridiculously too perfect. It's like it's like all of the characters, like everyone was handsome, everyone was beautiful, everyone like had this amazing, mysterious, chemistry with each other where everything was just so perfectly aligned. Like, it, to me, it didn't really make a lot of sense because it was almost just like it was just unrealistic. I'll say that. But for me, I think that there's always going to be these both positive and negative traits of the character, right? So like they can have their loving and positive side and their attractive and alluring side, but then they're also going to probably, have their quite unattractive side, or, scary side, or just even like the dark side of them, right? So when we say positive and negative, maybe I will just add as a further clarification is like maybe it's like they're light and they're dark. Of course, I would say something like that, right? Because I the whole spiritual side of things. So maybe that's an interesting thing that you guys can think about. Like, what aspects of your character would be their light, meaning their positive sides, meaning their loving side, just anything that they want to show to the world. But then what then is the dark side? What do they hide from the world themselves? And what are they running from? So that's not just character. This is human, to be human. Okay, so another way that you can think of how to develop your characters is like, just think about yourself. Just think about yourself and all of your dimensions. Think about the people that you know in your life. I really think it would be hard to think of a real person that has just one singular side to them and they are just one particular thing. Maybe it's possible, but I really kind of doubt that that exists fully. And even if the person does show you just one side of themselves, it's probably likely that they would have something that they hide from everyone. So these are just some ideas. Like, I'm just kind of spitting these out. Let me think of something else. So just to recap, I just mentioned, how research and symbolism can be very helpful in developing. And the first thing I talked about was meeting the character, right? Basing it off of someone. And I find that it really helps to develop that complexity. and just looking at the light and dark aspects of your character. Sorry if I'm kind of writing a little sloppy. It's this is not flat on the table. One other thing, in terms of adding to the realistic aspect of the characters is, and this is kind of tough. This is actually really tough, where we want to portray them in the scene or whatever. And how do we know what things they're going to do and what are they going to say versus what we think they would say? That is extremely difficult. If you guys have a good way of figuring that out, please let me know. Again, I think it's just a matter of relaxing and channeling and saying, okay, let me enter the scene right now and let me just observe, right? So it is going to be difficult to kind of switch off that part of your brain that's saying like, oh, I think the character should do this. I think they should say this versus no, what do they actually say? What do they actually do? So if you just picture yourself in that room, in that environment, wherever the scene is taking place, take a few deep breaths, relax, and actually allow the scene or the characters to unfold right then and there. You might find that it is actually something different is happening versus what you assumed or thought or expected to happen. I have found that, and it's really wild how different it can be. So I'll just say for that one, just be careful with your expectations in any shape or form. All right. One other fun thing to think about. So I was kind of talking about one singular character, but one fun thing to think about is thinking about the collection of the characters. So I have talked about this before, and I've talked about the contrast, right? The character contrast. So when you're reading a book or watching a movie or, whatever art, of course, it would probably be boring to most people if the cast of the characters were all essentially the same person. That is not only, in my opinion, kind of like lazy writing, but it's also just unrealistic, okay? If you have any collection of people, right, just in real life, on average, you are probably going to have a handful of people who are all quite different, right? So if you look at any good works of comedy or writing or movies or anything, you will find that the cast of the characters are all just so different and interesting in their own ways. If I did talk about this in past videos, I may have mentioned like I have enjoyed the cast of Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Superstore. Like those are two comedy examples where they were all so different. I guess another comedy example, it's animated, would be Bob's Burgers, where all the characters are literally wearing different colors, and they just all have such different personality types, but they all have chemistry with one another. So those three examples are pretty cool. And then you have, any kind of other good film or good art or anything like that will have characters that they go together very well, but somehow are just so different. And again, that chemistry is still there. There's a harmony. So I like to think of it as that. It's like an orchestra, right? Or a choir. Everyone has their different strengths, but they all flow together so beautifully. And I really enjoyed that. That's one of my favorite aspects of art and writing. So yeah, think about that. The contrast of your characters are, and obviously we don't want to force it. So this is really a happy accident of if you're developing real human forces, real characters, probably you'll end up with a great character contrast without even trying. So that would be probably really fun for you guys to develop if you haven't already. And again, just some other examples, like let's say this sort of like the cliche stuff, but let's say you have the not like good cop, bad cop, but it's like, oh, there's like the smart, mature sort of straight-faced detective, and then you have the one on the side, which is like the quirky one, and like the one that brings like that fun and that comedic effect. So it sometimes it gets a little bit more so that cliche, but you get the idea. That's sort of what they were, I think, going for. So I think the last thing that I'm going to talk about, so again, going back to developing a single character, right? So let's say that you have an idea at least of what the person looks like or feels like, and then now you get more so into kind of the nitty-gritty, kind of like this is really where we get into the development of characters. And for me, this is where I go insane in a good way sometimes, where I fill up notebook after notebook and so many notes and so much backstory. You don't have to do this. I was literally doing this for decades. I don't recommend doing it for that long, unless, of course, you feel you need to. But for me, I took and am taking my sweet time with developing this just because it's just my process, you know. And yes, I'm an overthinker and I should probably get it together someday. But the development process, this is more so, I would say, the psychology of the character. So some, you know, kind of obvious things to look at here would be the character's history, right? What have they gone through? What have they lived through in life? What, you know, you can certainly look to certain things like, you know, maybe their upbringing or their things that have significant things that have happened in their past that are relevant perhaps to the story today. Meaning, you know, we don't want to go over every single detail of their life and do a whole biography, just because that would be extremely taxing to do. But let's say which of those is relevant to the story now. Okay, so it's like their history, but now let's see what connects here. So obviously, if we're talking about something like a psychological thriller, we are definitely going to have some traumas that are relevant to the story. And obviously a trauma, well, in this case, the trauma is happening or happened in the past, but it does connect to the present. Okay, so that's what I mean by now, is just the present. So those are some things you can look at. Again, with history, you can look at some, again, significant things that they have gone through, memories, experiences, life experiences. And the question is like, well, why are they the way that they are? Okay, why are they the way that they are? So that's one aspect of things. So that would be looking at past. Now, if you're looking more so towards the present, I think that this is very interesting as well. And you can ask some questions that you can ask here. What do they want? Okay, what do they want? So this would be character motivation. I've definitely talked about this before. One writing reference book that I've read said something like the character wants to run towards something or run away from something. I've definitely talked about that before, and it's good to review that just because it's such a valid question. What do they want to run towards? What do they want to run away from? And with these two aspects, you can literally make a whole story. Like if you watch any good movie or read any good book, you will see that almost the entire thing is this character running towards something or running away from something. Try to pick it apart and see if you can find a good example of this in some books that you've read or movies you've watched, and you'll find that. Okay, so the question of what do they want? Again, this is character motivation, and I think that without this, it's going to be really hard to create the story. All right. So I would say in any good piece of writing that you would find this question in the first chapter, if not the first page or first few pages. Okay. And I would say that this is really what hooks us. We know that the character wants something and we know that they want it badly, usually, and that becomes the story. That essentially becomes the plot. Here's the character, here's what they want, and we're going to root for them, most likely, right? So that's what the story becomes. This character moving towards what they want, or just striving to achieve this thing, or to get this thing, or to feel this way. And it could be external motivation, you know, or it could be internal, meaning like, do they want something physical in the outer world? Do they want to feel something more so in the inner world? Do they want a sense of achievement for themselves? Do they want a sense of acceptance from someone else, right? These are all really nice things to think about. So just thinking off of the top of my head, again, I don't have that many examples because I'm just either I can't focus and sit and watch the whole movie, or I am just too picky. But if you think of any good movies or books, say, what does this character want? This is a random one that I just thought of because I still have the book here somewhere in the house. It's a book called Perfume, and in this story, honestly, it's a bit hard to read. It's like a lot. It's very wordy at first, but ultimately we see that the main character, he wants to collect the scent of women. And I know that sounds a little creepy, And honestly, it's something that really resonates with my novel today, which is kind of weird that I'm making this comparison now. But this character, he will not stop until he gets the scent of these different women. So the title is Perfume, and he has this weirdly powerful sense of smell. And it's like his goal in his mind is that he wants to make this perfect scent, and he will stop at nothing until he gets that perfect scent. And so, again, there we have the book. It's also a movie, too, if you want to check it out. I feel like the movie is probably more entertaining. And again, if you think of any other examples, you will see that that motivation must be there. So yeah, let me know if you can think of anything else. Obviously, you guys can think of just your own life. You know, what is your motivation? What is your goal or intention? And that can propel you for the rest of your life, right? So the question is really, and I guess to conclude everything here, just all my thoughts, the question is, do you have a character in mind that is meaningful to you, that is real to you, right? Where's the character? Then, when you have the character, does this character have a motivation? Do they want something, right? And then I guess at the end of that, the way that we create our plot, oh boy, plot can be so difficult, but I think in a nutshell, plot is realistically, I think the definition of it is like how the story impacts the actual character and what they're trying to go for. So yes, there will be conflicts, right? I don't think that realistically in life we can just go for something and immediately get that thing. Now, maybe that happens in some people's lives, but at least in story, I do feel like either we need conflicts or we need some kind of development. So obviously character development, development of the story itself. Not to say we're making conflict for the sake of just creating problems, but again, looking at it in terms of realistic story, some crap's gonna happen, you know? They're gonna run into obstacles. They're going to have to learn and to change and to really develop within their own self and their spirit in order to get to that point of that feeling of completion at the end. Completion, or let's say resolution, okay? Um, and that is really what we're looking for, right? We do want that sense of fulfillment at the end of any good story. Now, obviously, I'm just kind of spitting some random ideas here. I know that getting into the nitty gritty of the actual story development is extremely difficult, or it can be. But my recommendation for you guys and to myself is just to have that general idea. Now, I know for me, I did not take my idea for my novel seriously until one day I randomly discovered what happened at the end. Once that happened, I knew that I could someday write this book. So I had the character, I had the character motivation, but then I had to know, where does this end? Where is the closure? Where is the fulfillment? And maybe for you guys, if you do have sort of like a hanging plot, if you figure out this last piece, what is the fulfillment, the resolution, even if it's not what some people expect, but you know in your heart that it feels right, I think that you can write this thing. Okay. And maybe you did already. Okay. Like I said, I've been gone a long time. But that was just me kind of freely, again, stream of consciousness kind of video here. I hope some of it was kind of helpful for you guys. I'm just here to get back into, to obviously connect with you guys, but also for myself to get back into the inspiration of writing. And I do feel that I am little by little. Once I start writing little snippets of whatever, I'll definitely start to share that with you guys. If not for my novel, then maybe some blog stuff. But yeah, let me know in the comments any thoughts for you guys, any tips that you might have. I'm not an expert at all, so if you want to give me some tips as well, that would be great, or just for anyone here in the little itty bitty writing community that we have. So thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I hope it helped in some small way, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.